Welcome to Demand and Disrupt, the Disability Podcast. Here, we will learn to advocate for ourselves and each other. This podcast is supported with funds from the Advocato Press, based in Louisville, Kentucky. Welcome to Demand and Disrupt, a Disability Podcast. I am your host, Kimberly Parsley.
And I'm Lisa McKinley. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks, everyone. I'm interviewing today Danielle Burton. She is the communication accessibility editor for the American Printing House for the Blind. And that's a mouthful, but what it is she's the person who, they have a lot of people who are blind and deafblind and such at American Printing House. And so she's the person who edits all the documentation and things they send out to make sure that it's accessible for screen readers and the like. And I want my own personal communications accessibility editor. What about you?
So do I. And I want every company to have an editor. Like, wouldn't that be cool?
Yes, where they have to make sure that all the stuff they put out is accessible. That would be equally awesome. So Danielle Burton is wonderful and she's amazing, and you are really going to enjoy my interview with her. She told me something about I don't guess you call it a language, but a form of communication called haptics. And so basically what this is where someone will give you signals on the body to convey information about like the environment or social feedback or something like that. Like if, say, you're given in a presentation and your boss walks in, and like that might be information that would be good for you to have. But if you're blind, you can't see that, right? So a person like assisting you would be up there and would like tap on your back in such a way as to let you know that, hey, the boss just walked in.
Wow, that would come in really, really handy, wouldn't it?
It would. It really would. And I can't really figure out if I think there's an aspect to it that's formalized. Like, I think there are certain things that mean certain colors or things. You know, I think there is it's not formalized, but standardized, where it's standard symbols and things. But some of it's not. Some of it's just cues or things that you would have worked out. And of course, it would. She mentions like where they would like draw a thing or tap the signal or whatever on your back, you know, because that wouldn't interfere with what you're doing. Or I've seen this example of like, I bet you've done this, like where you're trying to get somewhere. So you open your hand flat and someone kind of draws like a map on your palm.
Yes.
Not in ink, but just, you know, like with their finger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be so helpful in so many situations. Like, you know, like if I'm talking about my kids and they walk in the room and I don't know it. Shh, your kids are in here, you know?
That's a perfect example. Exactly.
I'm sure it's used for much more important things, but yeah, I could see how in everyday little circumstances, and we were just talking about how quiet my husband is, and we kind of, when we're out in public, he's super quiet, and he's
super quiet. Yep. I can't even tell when he's around.
When he'll just kind of rub his finger on the back of my arm, and I know that he's rejoined me wherever we are. So, I mean, I guess that's maybe a form of haptic. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that may be between you all. That's kind of a non-standard form. I know with me and Michael, you know, if I'm walking sighted guide and I'm holding on to his arm, and let's say somebody says something ridiculous, I guess, he has this sign. He'll kind of like tap on my fingers where my hand is on his arm, and that tap means essentially, what a load of crap, you know.
It's like this secret eye roll. It's like the ADA compliant eye roll you guys have.
Like, because if people could see, you know, you look around and you'll give someone like an eyebrow, you know, like you're giving someone a look like, can you believe they said that or whatever, you know. So we can't do that. So Michael just gives me a little tap on the fingers, which is, you know.
Like, That's one of my biggest regrets in life that I can't roll my eyes. Like, oh my gosh, I would be in trouble all the time.
Haptics now. We have a whole new thing, and I'm gonna put a link to the show notes. It's the Helen Keller Center, a national center, does a training on stuff, and they have some training videos. And so I'm gonna drop the link to that in the show notes about haptics. Also, this week the Paralympics just wrapped up, and I was wondering, do you watch the Olympics or Paralympics or any such sporting stuff?
I did when I was younger. I used to love to watch ice skating. I don't know if they have Paralympic ice skating, but I don't even know how popular Paralympics was 30 years ago. But no, I should watch it more. But I know there was a picture circulating of a blind Olympian that won a medal for track and field or some sort of foot race, and his guide was on the podium with him. And I think it was really cool because it was captioned about how, you know, we all get where we are because of others, because his guide had to train just as hard as he did. And I thought that was really cool. We all of us, disabled or not, we're all here because of, you know, the help of someone else. So
Yeah, all of us. Yeah,
cool.
exactly. That is cool. Yeah, that's cool. Paralympics, you hear a lot more about it now than you used to. I mean, used to, I knew Olympics and I knew Special Olympics, but not Paralympics until, you know, I was an adult, I guess. I assumed they had them long before then, but I was not exactly an athletic type person. So, what about you? Did you ever do any sports or compete in any sports?
I did. I competed in judo when I was in high school and then my first year in college. And when I was in high school, I really enjoyed it. It was kind of like fun. Just, and we went to different competitions. And then actually, my freshman year of college, I started training here in Bowling Green, and they wanted me to train to go to the Paralympics. But, that just wasn't where my mind was at the time. I was doing it for the socialization and the exercise and the camaraderie, but I didn't really have any interest in that. And I think kind of was annoying to them on their part. But, we all have our thing.
Yeah, I mean, uh, so I am impressed. First of all, also explain what judo is.
Oh, okay. Of course. Judo. Well, I'm sure most people know what wrestling is. Judo starts in a standing stance. So you have your two opponents and they come together. I think you come together about 2 or 3 feet apart from each other, no contact. And then once the whistle is blown or the referee gives the signal, there's some kind of Japanese word for the referee. I don't really remember what that is right now, but then you will grab your opponent's lapel and they grab yours of your gi, which the gi is the little robe outfit that you wear with a little belt. But you grab each other's lapel and then you kind of try to knock each other off balance, and who hits the floor first, the person who put the other person into the floor, gets points. And then you basically go into wrestling where you can pin your opponent or choke out your opponent and all different things that will get you points. And once your opponent taps out, then the match is over.
So, do you still keep up your practice at all?
I don't, but I'll tell you a funny story. It has been very valuable because one thing you do in judo is one thing in practice is people throw you to the floor over and over repetitively as part of the drills, and you learn to fall in a way that you won't be injured. And in college, this was like a few years after I stopped practicing, someone came over to to the dorm and spent the night with me, and I gave them the bottom bunk and I slept on the top bunk. And I was in the habit of keeping my talking alarm clock on the floor. And to make myself get up, I would just roll out of the bed onto the floor and then turn off the alarm clock. Well, I did the same thing, but from the top bunk, which was like, I don't know, 5 feet or more. And I just rolled onto the concrete floor. But I instinctively fell into the judo fall position, so I didn't hurt myself. That was really cool. You learn to protect yourself. It's a good sport for the visually impaired.
Hey, learning how to fall well, that's a life skill right there.
Oh, yeah.
Metaphorically and literally. Learn how to fall well.
Well, you learn how to break people's arms and choke people too, so that's always fun.
What does Patrick say about this? Is he?
Well, he knows I use my powers only for good.
Oh, listen to that. Listen to that. I love it. That's awesome. That or you have the bluff on him.
Yeah, that's probably it.
The Paralympians, I mean, just all the training, so much work. They put so much work and effort into, and they don't get as many of the big sponsorships and things like the Olympians get. Then you and I attended an event together this past Friday. We don't do much things together.
We should more.
We should. We went to the Kentucky Department for Protection and Advocacy, who we have had on the show, Beth Metzger from there. They did a training here in Bowling Green for disabled people about voting. And we went, and another person from the South Central Kentucky Council of the Blind went. And it was interesting and fascinating. And, I think it's so important that, well, number one, that they did that they're out there and that they're like, hey, we want you to vote. So we're going to answer your questions. And,
yes, and you may not know this. You made the news.
Who made the news?
You did.
Me.
Well, at least your face. Yeah, the local television station was there.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you and another one of our members. You can see them in the background, you and him in the background of the video, sitting and having a conversation.
Really?
Yep. Oh. So,
okay.
Our voices, we made our voice heard. We represented, and I think it was great that they came out and, tried to give a little more education on accessible voting. There's progress to be made, but we're taking step forward, and I think that's great.
Yes, and it's important that they were there doing the training, and it's important that people showed up. And there were several people there that we showed up and said, "Hey, we're interested. We do not want to be ignored or have our opinions or our needs shunted aside. We want to have a voice and be heard." And we showed up and did that. And I think it's great. I remember something David Allgood, who works for the Center for Accessible Living, he does advocacy stuff in our Louisville office, told me was that when you're writing to your elected officials, they can look up, they can't see how you voted, but they can look up and see whether you voted in the last, election, 2 elections, whatever. They can see whether or not you voted, not how you voted or who you voted for, but that you voted. So it's important that we vote because it carries more weight when we want change, when we go to our elected officials and say, hey, I have a problem with this. I would like for you to work on my behalf for this. And one of our members from our local group said his daughter votes. And, so a lot of times when the elected officials, local officials are canvassing the neighborhood looking for votes, they'll knock on the door, ask for her. And if she's not there, they'll say, oh, well, are you a voter? And he'll say no. And because he isn't usually, and because of the trouble it is for people who are disabled to vote. And he said the person always says, all right, well, take care. I'll see you.
Wow. No.
Mm-mm.
No
Nope.
Trying to figure out why he's a disillusioned voter, or no kind of
if you don't vote, they're not interested. But if you vote, then they listen, I guess. So interesting. isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Just the way democracy works, right?
Democracy. Yes. But
it's an imperfect system, but it's our system.
But I tell my children every day when they start complaining about things that, we may have our problems, but we really are blessed to live in a country, in a democracy where our voices can be heard, because so many countries don't have that.
That is true. That is true. What we tell our kids when they complain about things dealing with this house is, I don't know who told you this house is a democracy, because it's not.
I own you do not get a vote. And I own you.
I don't really say that, but I have referred to myself perhaps as the supreme leader a time or two. So, they, I'm not sure they find it amusing, but effective. And that's the point. But no, yes, democracy, absolutely. Very important that we vote, we show up, we be informed. It's work. Don't get me wrong, it's work, but that's sort of the social contract, right? Is we put in the work and we get the right to vote. So.
We do, absolutely. And if you are out there and you've had any problems with accessibility when trying to cast your vote, let us know. Shoot us an email. We'd love to hear your story.
We would. And closer to Election Day, we will be probably talking about, there's a hotline in Kentucky, Department for Protection and Advocacy has, if you're encountering any problems at the polls. Of course, people from anywhere in the country can listen to this podcast. So you might want to, here in Kentucky, that's the Kentucky Department for Protection and Advocacy. It might be called something different in your state. So you might have the name of that organization and that number ready just in case you encounter problems on polling day. So important stuff. And now I think we will pivot to my interview. Are you excited to hear all about haptics?
I am very excited. I think I'm going to learn a lot.
And Danielle Burton knows way more about it than I do. And so here is my interview with Danielle Burton. Thank you so much for joining us today, Danielle. How are you?
I'm doing well.
And you are, do you kind of define yourself as deaf-blind? Is that correct?
Yes, I identify as deaf-blind. It's a lot easier. I have no vision. I used to say I have moderate hearing, but I'm pretty sure that's gotten worse. So I'd probably say I have more of a moderate hearing loss nowadays. I don't know. It is what it is. I haven't had a hearing test since 2020, and I kind of, whatever.
Yeah. And you use hearing aids in both ears, is that correct?
Yes. I use hearing aids in both ears. Right now I'm using headphones, because sometimes the hearing aids like to give this echo thing going on, and sometimes it causes the recording to sound really echoey. It's really weird. I don't know. I think it's the mic. I think it's because it doesn't use because it amplifies it to the hearing aids, but then it uses the phone microphone, and I think because of that distance, it does sometimes there's like a feedback on the other end.
Now, tell me, I was watching some interviews that you had done, and you made the decision to learn tactile sign language.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me how you came to make that decision.
Well, no, I mean, I grew up I grew up as the only deafblind person in public school, and I was always around individuals. I was involved, my teacher of the blind was involved in the National Federation of the Blind. So I grew up around that NFB philosophy of, having good blindness skills. And I did attend a blindness training center when I was in high school. I'm really glad I did that first. And I did have more hearing back then, but at the same time, I knew that it wasn't great. And so when I went to Morehead State University, I was majoring in elementary and special education, and I found it really challenging to know what was happening in the classroom because I couldn't hear what was going on. I could hear the teacher, and I could kind of, I knew what knew what the class was kind of doing. But as far as like being able to observe students and side conversations and things like that, it just wasn't happening. And I, had just recently met more deaf-blind adults, and they were talking to me about using interpreters and using support service providers and things like that. And I thought, at that point, I really wasn't sure how I was going to student teach. And I was like, I don't have the skills to know what I need to accommodate my hearing, because that was never addressed going through school. Blindness to the education world, blindness was the more severe disability. And because I could speak and I made good grades, I didn't have a teacher of the deaf. So then I decided to go to the Helen Keller National Center to learn ASL. And while I was there, like, I learned some basics, but I didn't really learn like enough to be able to communicate well. So while I was there, my former TBI again, bless her, she's probably the best thing that probably could have happened. But she said, why don't you, look at the Deaf Studies program at UK or at Eastern Kentucky University? And I said, sure, why not? So I did, and I called them, and I talked to one of the first people I talked to was Kimberly Hale, who was one of the advisors for the ASO department. And she said, and I was like, I'm totally blind. Like, I want to take ASL 101. I'd like to enroll, and, I would be tactile. And like, I explained that I had a progressive hearing loss. And she said, yeah, that's no problem. You're just using an interpreter in class. She literally made it sound like it was no big deal. And, a lot of universities are telling blind people they can't take ASL classes because they have to see. So
really?
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Really? Huh. So I know you said, well, first of all, would you like to say your teacher's name so that she gets all the praise that she deserves?
Yeah. Laura Pelty Stevens. She wasn't exactly my full TBI, and she was actually my tech teacher on Saturdays. And then now she's kind of basically family at this point.
Those people are so important, aren't they?
Yeah, they're family anymore. I talk to her about every week, so.
Awesome. That's awesome. So you said that according to the public school, being blind is the bigger disability. So do you feel like you had needs that weren't addressed in the public schools because your deafness was not really considered, it sounds like?
A lot of incidental learning. Like, I wasn't able to know really what was happening. A lot of people, like, kids have conversations, side conversations in class, and when the teacher turns around, things like that. And like not being able to hear the students in the back of the room. So just not really being able to like, go up to like a group of people and interact because I couldn't hear them. So there was a lot of that social isolation that occurred because of.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people, I mean, we all, whether you're disabled or not, but especially blind people, you all have we all have those instances where things, we're just left out of something, or, but in a classroom setting, you're looking at the beginning of the class, knowing every day you're going to have to come and deal with that isolation. That is tough.
I read books, so like I think I coped well. I read books, and like the people directly in front of, behind me, and beside me I spoke to, but that was about. I did do swimming in high school.
Competitively?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. That's wonderful. Do you follow the Olympics? Did you follow the Olympics this summer with the swimming and stuff?
I did not.
Ah, okay. Me either. Don't feel bad. Me either. I feel like I should be following the Paralympics.
I know, right? I kind of halfway watch it.
I'm not doing that either. I really. So how did learning tactile ASL help you to be more involved in classrooms and social settings?
I think the biggest thing is it's allowed me to have options in communication, like especially in difficult situations. Like now, for like my team meetings at work, I don't use an interpreter. I just pass my microphone around because we're in a smaller room and like I know everybody's voices. But for like the larger department meetings, and we tend to have it in this big open room that's echoey and stuff like
Hate
that, and
those
it's kind of
rooms.
hard. Yeah. So at
Mhm.
those point, and it's a larger number of people, and so I use tactile interpreters for that. Like I still can use my hearing. I think for me, it's allowed me to like. This is going to sound really weird, and this is not how you're technically supposed to do this, but this is how I do it. Is I can kind of fill in the gaps. Like if I miss what I heard, I can watch the person signing versus, or if I missed something that was signed, I can, so I kind of flip flop it. So it kind of helps that total communication and filling in gaps.
Oh, I
If
don't
that
think
makes,
that's yeah, I don't think that's cheating. I think it's like, people who could see and hear, they're getting visual information and audio information. So, it's
yeah,
you're
yeah.
you're getting audio and tactile information. So that I think that's great. Then are there any other things that you do? I know someone was talking, I saw in an interview about using haptics.
I
Haptics?
did, yeah,
Uh-huh.
haptics, which is also known as touch signals. So sometimes I will use that, like if I am presenting to a group of audience in person. I like to have someone, provide that information on my back, like, oh, the people are nodding, people are laughing, or people are getting sleepy. Let's be real, because
And
that happens too.
is that an informal form of communication, or is that
Um,
formalized in some way?
So it is formalized in some way, yes. But also there's a lot of wiggle room of like there are some formal touch cues that was developed by people in Norway. Um
Really? Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. So there is a book, haptic communication, something. Helen Keller National Center publishes it. I think it's on iBooks. But there are
Okay.
and I don't know. I did at one point learn like colors and drinks and stuff like that. But for me personally, I use some of the stuff for like presentations, and then sometimes I'll use stuff for like mapping. If I go to a new environment, I like someone to draw it on my back or on my hand, to kind of
Uh-huh.
map it out.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
I've also used it for other random things like rock climbing. Like, okay, describe the wall to me before I climb it. So that, or I
I'm sorry.
think it
Did you say rock climbing?
I did.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that next then. So go ahead. Go on then with your what what were you saying?
Yeah. And I use it for various other things. Like if like they gave it to a fair once, and I told my friend, I said, I want to throw these darts at these balloons, and he's like, okay. So then he's like behind me on my butt trying to show me where the balloons are, and I'm like aiming the darts at the balloons and hitting the balloons. So it works.
It does. It sounds, yeah. That's something I need to look into more. That is awesome. I think that would be beneficial for a lot of people,
I
very.
think it would be even for hearing blind people, but a lot of people don't think about how that could, be beneficial to someone who's just hearing and blind. But I think
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely would be. So now the rock climbing, let's go back to that. So apparently you do a lot of outdoorsy and adaptive type stuff, right?
I do.
Okay.
I try my hand at a little bit of everything. I was exposed to rock climbing when I was a student at Blind Incorporated, one of the NFB training centers when I was in high school. They took all of us indoor rock climbing, and at that point it was on auto belays, and I was bound and determined because one of the counselors, well, he was actually a cane travel instructor. He was like climbing this wall, and we were like, okay, we're gonna get to the top of our wall somehow. So that was my first experience of top rope climbing is what it's called. Because you're in a harness and you have the rope. I don't do bouldering. I actually have a brittle bone condition, so I don't do bouldering because there's no harness and there's no rope, and I don't really want to fall and break something, so that I don't touch. But I do indoor rock climbing. I prefer being belayed, and then I prefer to hand them my FM, my microphone, and then they can, depending on the wall, sometimes I don't need it, and sometimes if it's a really challenging wall, it's helpful for them to give me direction about where a good hold might be that's just out of my reach, because I am short. I am 4'6", and
Okay.
yeah. Us short people and climbing sometimes has problems. So anyway,
so is that something you get to do often?
I haven't been in a while. I've been super busy with various random stuff because I'm in the midst of wedding planning and
congratulations.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I've lost my mind. But anyway. So I'm trying to do all of that and just and doing some work on the side for the deafblind equipment distribution program, the I Can Connect program. I recently contracted with them to provide instruction to deafblind individuals in the assistive technology that they get from the program. So,
and is that Kentucky only, or is that?
So the program itself is across all 50 states, but I am kind of the only trader that's actually based in Kentucky. As far as, the Helen Keller National Center is running the program out, and the person that's in charge of Kentucky has to fly in and things like that. So, like, we don't have any trainers based in Kentucky until I signed that contract. So,
okay.
So and there's my Saturdays for you.
So tell me, what's the name of that program again?
It's called I Can Connect.
Okay. And it is. Tell me about it again.
It is it's mandated by the FCC, and it's to provide free distance telecommunication equipment to individuals who are deafblind, who meet the vision and hearing eligibility and the income guidelines.
Okay.
And so what? And training, and the training of using that technology.
And so, what kind of equipment is this?
It can be like an iPhone. It could be a laptop. It could, anything for like email outside. It has to be distance communication. Like, like a CCTV isn't typically on the list because that's not distance communication, like over the internet.
Right.
So, but refreshable braille displays, keyboards, any of those like accessories that will help with that. I think there's some trying to think what else there is. There's like some alarm type stuff, I believe. Cell phones, mobile phones, amplified phones, caption phones, things like that.
Oh, And you do that, when you're not wedding planning and stuff, right?
When I'm not wedding planning and working my 40-hour work.
So have you become a bridezilla already?
I'm sure my mother would probably say yes.
I bet you're not.
And my fiance is just kind of like, whatever. I ask him what he wants to do. He goes, I don't know. I'm like, all right, I'm doing it. And then too bad.
That's what you want. Someone who goes along with all your plans. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for. I like that a lot. And I know you'd moved to Louisville. And one of the things you are kind of, I guess, sort of by happenstance, got involved in doing some advocacy in relation to TARC, the transportation there in Louisville. Can you tell me a little about that?
Yeah. So I before I moved to Louisville, I've been to the Kentucky School for the Blind and things like that here. So I've been on the TARC. TARC is our public bus system. For those that don't know, think it's like Transit Authority of River City, something like that. So it's a public bus system. And before COVID, the buses were great. They ran probably 15, 30 minutes, something like that. Now, after COVID, they're on a weekend plus schedule. So they run about every hour to 75 minutes, which is already a pain.
Mm-hmm.
So since I moved here and the buses are that way, it's kind of like I don't really take it much. But then we found out that because of lack of funding and like a budget, that they're looking for 2025, either cutting routes or either they're going to cut routes and do like a ridership thing where like just more frequently in like high population areas of Louisville, or they're going to keep all the routes and like it's going to be less frequent bus stops, which is probably going to be less frequent than it already is. So either way you look at it, it's not going to be good. But at the same time, if they're going to cut routes, that's parts of the city that's going to be completely cut off from people with disabilities, or just not even that, but people who rely on public transportation. And it's also going to impact the paratransit system, because paratransit, the mandate is 347 mile from the fixed route. So if there's no route going to that part of Louisville, guess what? There's no paratransit going there either.
That, transportation is just always going to be an uphill battle. It's very frustrating. And thank you for doing the advocacy and what you're doing. Also, thank you for telling me what TARC stood for, because no one has ever told me that before. And Transit Authority, I could pretty much figure out, but the River City thing, I never got. So thank you. You have educated me well today.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was either until I looked it up. So don't worry.
So this will impact you directly, right? I mean, your lifestyle. Yeah.
When I get married next year, me and when my fiance moves up here after we get married, we were talking about, moving to a bigger apartment, things like that. But now I don't know what to do, because, are we going to be able to find anywhere else to go that's on a bus line, even not just a bus, but the paratransit would go there too. So I don't know. Which, we could make it work in my 2-bedroom apartment now if we need to, but at the same time, I really, really would have liked to have been able to, move about next spring and have a washer and dryer in my apartment, but we'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So aside from accessible public transportation, what other supports need to be in place for you to be successful?
Being able to walk places, sidewalks, good. I don't like crazy, like crossing interstates to get to places. I like to be able to walk in high pedestrian areas, especially being deafblind and not always being able to, when I get to the curb, I don't know, depending on my hearing that day, that time, or whatever, I don't always feel comfortable making traffic judgments. So like being in a high population area where I can be like, hey, I need some assistance. If I wait a few minutes, someone will probably be by because people are walking. So that's really important to me, so that I can go and wander around the city. And, I like going, finding places to eat, and coffee shops and ice cream shops and things like that a little too much.
Well, those are the things that make city life worth all the hassle, isn't it? The being able to go out and do stuff.
So that's important to me. And, being around, I have a lot of friends that live in this particular area that I'm at. So like, I don't really want to move, but at the same time, there are some conveniences I would like. Like I said, my washer and dryer is in another building right now. which means I had to drag my stuff over there, which is, I've done it for 2 years, but I really would like to have my own washer and dryer in my apartment.
Yeah, definitely. I know when I was shopping for a house, just having washers and dryer that was in a basement of a house was a reason for me not to buy that house. So
yeah.
It being in another building, I can't even imagine. So Maria Kemplin, who now works for Center for Accessible Living, who gives funding for this podcast, she's the one who introduced me to you. And she describes you as adventurous and fearless. And I think that is true. And so I'm wondering, where does that fearlessness and that can-do attitude come from?
I would probably say my parents. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Eastern Kentucky. So you would think I would be like, in some ways in that regard, I was sheltered because, rural area. But in a way I wasn't, because, I was expected to do things. I was expected to be successful in school. I got out and, my mom would take me out to the garden with her to work. So, when I was real little, I wouldn't touch the grass. She knew she could set me on the blanket. I wouldn't go anywhere. But yeah, but anyway, but they kind of persisted and insisted to the point where I was like 4 or 5. By the time I was 4 or 5, I was running around the yard barefoot, says the kid who wouldn't touch the grass. So,
yeah.
But, I was expected to help. I find it interesting when I would go to like camps for blind kids and stuff, and they would take the kids to a farm. Like, these kids had never seen sheep or horses or anything, cows, and they're like, "Oh, you want to touch it?" And I'm going, sure. So I grew up with all of that stuff. My papa had horses, so I, been on a horse. He brought me a calf, when I was about, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something like that. So I grew up with, those kinds of hands-on experiences. My cousin would come down from Indiana, and my dad would take us hiking over at Carter Caves, and
I did not grow up on a farm, but I grew up in a very rural area, and nothing makes you learn how to figure it out like being raised in the middle of nowhere, does it? I mean,
yeah. Try getting lost in your own yard, because sometimes I would get up and I would be like, I have no idea where I am. And even now, like, I go to my parents and I'm like wandering around, and I go take my dog out, and I'm just like, I really miss my little patch of grass outside my apartment where, like, I can't get lost because the blacktop is right there, and then the building's right there, and then I go back and I'm like, all right, dog, I hope you know how to find your way back to the stairs, to the door, because I don't. Yeah.
Nope. Exactly. You learn how to just figure it out, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things about Kentucky. I mean, is that we have urban areas, but also there's just a lot of rural areas with farmland and just wonderful people. I love Kentucky. Everyone knows I love the state that I come from. So
I love Kentucky, but Kentucky's transportation as a state is terrible.
That there's definitely room for improvement. There's definitely room for improvement. I'm so glad that you.
Yeah. I miss living when I was in Minnesota at Blind Inc. I actually went back and worked there, and it was so nice being able to just hop on a bus and go to random places. And then even when I was at Helen Keller National Center, I could get a taxi into Port Washington and then hop on a train into Manhattan. Like, it was nice.
Oh, wow. And that's tough when you had it and then you don't have it anymore, isn't it?
Yeah.
Danielle, what do you wish people knew about deafblindness?
I think the biggest thing is, people think that people who are deafblind are totally deaf and totally blind. And that is absolutely not true. Right? There's such a variety and diversity within the deafblind community. Some identify with deaf culture, some of them do not. Some, primarily use speech, even, don't use Braille, some do. It's very very, very diverse, and their abilities are very diverse, and people have various combinations of vision and hearing loss. Some people have low vision and some hearing, and some had no vision and some hearing, and some have some low vision and no hearing. So there's such a variety, and there's a variety in communication. So if you meet someone who's deafblind, identify yourself, you speak, if you know ASL, sign, but you might want to touch the person on the shoulder so that they know that you're talking to them. So just kind of go by how they respond to you, if they turn and speak, or if they put their hand up for ta-ta, just I guarantee you they'll show you how to communicate. And if you don't know ASL, generally they'll find some way to communicate, whether it's pulling out their phone or something. Just be open to, and just let them take the lead. That they'll let you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great way to end it. It's all people are different, but all people are people, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So Danielle Burton, it has been wonderful talking with you, and thanks for hanging out with me today.
No problem.
If you like the podcast, remember to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you really like the podcast, we'd love it if you could leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. That helps more people to find us. If you really, really like the podcast, then please tell someone about it, either in person or send them an email or just share the link on social media. Thank you all. Every bit helps, and it makes a huge difference for us. If you'd like a transcript, please send us an email to demandanddisrupt@gmail.com and put transcript in the subject line. Thanks to Chris Unkin for our theme music. Demand and Disrupt is a publication of the Advocato Press with generous support from the Center for Accessible Living located in Louisville, Kentucky. And you can find links to buy the book, A Celebration of Family, Stories of Parents with Disabilities, in our show notes. Thanks, everyone.
You say you've seen a change in me. Just for once I think I would agree. We both know there's a difference. We've had our curtain call, and this time the writing's on the wall. War of words we can't defend. Two damaged hearts refuse to mend. This situation's pointless with each and every day. It's not a game we need to play. Try to make things better, repair and rearrange things, but each and every letter spells out the need for us to open up our minds and hearts to change. Then what will be. Disregard for good to set us free. There's just no way of knowing if love lives anymore. Turn out the light, then close the door. Tried to but each and every letter spells out the need for us to open up